Welcome back to the Filipino FM channel. The English Premier League starts up again on Friday with Manchester City versus Burnley. And with that first match, I'm going to try to predict the 2023-24 English Premier League table. There, of course, is the caveat that I am probably going to be wrong. Predictions are notoriously poor, but I think it's still fun to talk about the season anyways, talk about each team, predict where they might finish in the table, and we will go from there. So with that, let's go from the bottom to the top. So we're going to start with who I think will finish in 20th place. And the team that I am predicting to finish 20th place is Sheffield United. So Sheffield United are one of the newly promoted clubs, and I just don't have a good feeling about Sheffield United going into this season. They haven't really strengthened their squad. Arguably, they're a worse squad than they were in their promotion campaign. And just without those reinforcements, I don't see them doing well. They've also had a really poor preseason, which I just think augments the poor feeling for Sheffield United going into the season. There's nothing about Sheffield United right now that really inspires me, so I can see them going down. I have them 20th place. So next up in 19th place, I am predicting Bournemouth. I was really surprised last season when they fired Gary O'Neill because I thought he did a good job last season. They're bringing in a new manager, Areola, who, to be fair, I mean, he could do very well. He had a really great stint in Spain with, I believe, Rayo Vallecano, but I just think there's just kind of that unknown factor to Bournemouth that just makes me lean towards them maybe not doing so well throughout the season. I also look at their squad and I just don't know if they have enough quality players to keep them up. So right now, I have them going down in 19th place. And that brings me to the last team that I think right now is going to get relegated, and that is Wolves. The news has just emerged that Lopetegui is leaving Wolves and that Gary O'Neill is probably going to be the one who replaces him. And despite the fact that Gary O'Neill did really well at Bournemouth last season, I think he did a fantastic job in keeping them up. He's just not someone that inspires me to keep Wolves up. Wolves last season were pretty poor until Lopetegui came in. I just don't. I think he's such a brilliant manager. I think it's a big loss to lose him. And I just don't know where the goals are going to come from in Wolves right now. They've lost Raul Jimenez. They haven't really signed anyone to play that number nine position. They've also lost Ruben Neves. That's a huge loss there. I believe they've also lost like João Moutinho and a couple of others. I just don't see Wolves investing what they need to be able to stay up. Like even if they're doing poorly in January, I just don't see them investing what they need to be able to stay up. For that reason, I just have a bad feeling about Wolves going into the season, and I think they're going to go down. Next up, in 17th place, I have Luton Town. This might be just more of the feeling that I want Luton Town to stay up than actually believing that they will. But I think if they are going to stay up, it's going to be because of their home form. Once Kennelsworth Road is up to Premier League standards and they are able to play matches at their home stadium, I think they're going to have really good home form. I think that, Luton Town fans, it's just going to be a cauldron in there. They have a great atmosphere. They have a wonderful stadium. I think their home form is going to keep them up. It's something so different than what we normally see in the Premier League. They also have just that very direct style. They're kind of a bit of a throwback team, but it's just such a good story. I think that Luton Town is just going to be inspired to stay up. Next up in 16th place, I have Everton. And really, this is all down to Sean Dyche having a good solid team, a good solid defense, I think, and the midfield with players like Decore and Onana, they have a lot of industry in there. I think that Sean Dyche is going to keep them very solidified, and I think they'll get enough points to finish safely above the relegation zone. Next up in 15th place, I'm going to predict Nottingham Forest. Now, Nottingham Forest haven't really made any signings this past season, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think that with all the signings they've made last season, they had something at the end of last season. I thought Steve Cooper found a way to play towards the end of last season. They picked up a lot of points. I think they'll carry that momentum into this season to be able to stay relatively safely out of the comfort zone. I think Awanui up top, I think we're going to see him get double-digit goals again. He's just such a physical presence, and I think he'll do well. I think we'll see players like Gibbs White really come into the fold, and I think they'll have an even better season than they did previously. So I like Nottingham Forest to stay clear of the relegation zone this season. Moving forward to 14th place, I am predicting Brentford. Now, I think this may be a little bit of a surprise given how well Brentford has done in the past 2 seasons, but I'm just a little bit worried about Brentford given that they've lost 15 to 20 goals in Ivan Toney. He will be back this season, but they're losing him kind of at the beginning with his gambling suspension. I'm not sure how they're going to do this season. I mean, third season in, they've shown they're a solid club, which is why I think they'll finish kind of in this area. They'll stay clear of the relegation zone. I think they will be comfortable throughout the season. I don't think we'll ever be worried about Brentford, getting relegated or anything like that. But I just don't think they're going to quite hit the heights that we've seen in previous seasons. All right, moving on to 13th place, I have Crystal Palace. I think Roy Hodgson is a very solid coach, and I think Crystal Palace has a lot of really exciting players like Eze and Elise. Now, this is kind of contingent on players like Elise staying. I think he is wanted by Chelsea, but I just don't think he's going to leave this season. So, assuming that Elise, Eze, and some of these players stay at the club, I think they'll do very well. Obviously, they have lost a bit of a talisman in Wilfred Zaha, who has gone to Galatasaray during the summer transfer window. But I like Crystal Palace to stay up. I like Roy Hodgson as a coach, and I think they'll finish comfortably in 13th place. Moving forward to 12th place, I have Fulham. Fulham had a really good season last season, and I think they will once again finish comfortably kind of in mid-table. I do think, I wonder how happy Alexander Mitrovic is at the club. Obviously, he kind of vowed never to play for Fulham again. He wants that move to Saudi Arabia. But I think that Fulham have enough around them to still finish comfortably mid-table. I think they have a really solid midfield with players like Andreas Pereira and João Palhinha. So this is a really good team. I think Marco Silva is a fantastic coach, and I think they will finish comfortably mid-table. All right, moving into 11th place, our last position in the bottom half of the table. I think it's going to be Burnley. I really like Burnley. I have a really positive feeling about Burnley coming into the season. I think they've had a fantastic transfer window. I think Vincent Kompany has done a fantastic job with Burnley. They play a really good style of football. They reminded me a little bit of Fulham last season, the team that really did well in the championship. I think they're going to bring a lovely style of play to the Premier League, and I think they're going to do very well. I have them finishing in 11th place. All right, moving into the top half of the table. In 10th place, I have Brighton. Now, this might be a surprising pick, especially given how well Brighton have done the past 2 seasons. I'm about to say a lot of good things about Brighton. I think they're going to finish 10th because I'm just not sure if they have the squad depth at the moment to do as well as they've done in the English Premier League and also be a force in the Europa League. That being said, and I do think that Brighton can be a little inconsistent even with De Zerbi. I think we saw it last season, especially towards the end of the season, where they'd have some really fantastic games, but then they also kind of got blown out by Everton. That being said, I think this is a really good team. I think they're going to have some good highs this season. I think De Zerbi is a fantastic coach. I think we're going to see players like Enciso and Mitoma again just have really good seasons. But the reason I have them finishing 10th is because I think they're going to go really far in the Europa League. I think they're going to be a team that's making the quarterfinals, semifinals, finals of the Europa League. And because of that, I can see them kind of faltering late on in the EPL. I think they may be a little bit higher and then drop off as the focus kind of turns to the Europa League. And I really think they're going to do really well in the Europa League. I think De Zerbi is going to put a lot of time and energy into the Europa League. As a result, I think Brighton will still finish in the top half. I don't know if they'll hit the same heights in the EPL as they have in the previous seasons, but I think they'll be going for a trophy, whether it's a domestic competition or I think they're going to have a really strong showing in the Europa League. And that's kind of why I have them finishing 10th. All right, next up, moving into 9th place, I have West Ham. Now, West Ham they obviously won the Europa Conference League. They didn't have such a good season in the league, but I think they're going to do well this season. I think they're going to come back. Now, the question is, I don't know if they're going to do this with David Moyes or without David Moyes. If David Moyes stays at the club, I mean, I think he has to be in a position like 9th place for them to keep him. I think the hierarchy are ambitious now, And given kind of the pessimism around David Moyes, I think he's going to have to do really well to stay in the job. But what I can see happening is maybe David Moyes not having such a strong start to the season. And I think that if he doesn't have a strong start to the season, the West Ham hierarchy are going to pull the plug very early on David Moyes. And Julian Lopetegui is open. He's left the Wolves. I think Lopetegui is a fantastic manager. I can see him or somebody like him coming into this West Ham side and bringing them into the top half of the table. And I think this is a really good side. You have players like Jared Bowen, Lucas Paqueta. These are all really fantastic players. I think they're top half of the table type players. But I think the quality of West Ham side is there to finish in the top half of the table. And if David Moyes is still with the club, I think they have to have a top half finish for the West Ham hierarchy to keep him. And if not, I can see someone like Lopetegui coming in, maybe even earlier in this season, and bringing West Ham up to the top half of the table in the same way that kind of Unai Emery did last season with Aston Villa. And speaking of Aston Villa, I have them finishing in 8th place. I think Aston Villa are a fantastic club. I'm a little worried about them if somebody like Ollie Watkins gets injured, because I just think there's so many goals in Ollie Watkins. But they've had a fantastic transfer window. Yuri Tielemans, Musa Diaby, and Pau Torres, I think are three absolutely fantastic signings. I think they're going to win the Europa Conference League this season, which is kind of similar to Brighton. Another reason why I think maybe, because if anybody is going to break honestly into the top six, I think it's going to be Aston Villa. However, I think they're really going to focus on the Europa Conference League because I think Unai Emery's, who I think is a fantastic manager, especially at this level, is going to be sniffing around that trophy. And he's really going to believe, I think, that they can win the trophy, especially after West Ham did it last year. I'm predicting Aston Villa to win the Europa Conference League, and I think they'll finish probably around 8th. I think they're going to have a really good season. I think Emery's a fantastic manager. Players like Musa Diaby and Yuri Tielemans are going to bring a lot to this side. And because of that, I think we could see them win the Europa Conference League, and I'm predicting a good finish for them around 8th place. So now we're going to move on to 7th place, and in 7th place, I'm predicting Newcastle, which I think might be a bit controversial, but I just see so much of the energy going into them being back into the Champions League that I think we'll see a bit of a dip in the Premier League. And kind of the other thing about Newcastle is, and a lot of you might disagree with me, I don't know. They have a much deeper squad now. I don't know if they have a better squad though compared to last season. Well, I think a lot of the teams around them have gotten better. I don't know if Newcastle have. I think Sandro Tonali is a fantastic signing. I think we'll see him doing really well. But players like Harvey Barnes and Tino Livramento, I don't know if they necessarily make the squad better than they were last season, but I do think they make the squad deeper. And I can see them, they're going to be playing their best 11 in the Champions League. I can see them getting out of the group stages. I think they'll make the knockout rounds of the Champions League. I'm just a little bit worried about that they haven't. I just don't feel like they've gotten better with their signings. I think they have a deeper squad, and I think they have a squad for the future that's going to be a lot better because I think Tonali's young, Livermento's young, players like Anthony Gordon, Alexander Isak, they have a young squad who are all going to be developing together and they're going to be very good in the future. I just think after the highs of last season, there's going to be a dip with how Newcastle does in the league. That being said, I still think they're going to have a very good season. I can see them finishing around 7th place. I see them making a decent run in the Champions League, but I just don't think they're going to quite hit the same heights as they did last season. I'm moving into 6th place, and honestly, I could have flipped Spurs, who I have finishing in 6th place, and Newcastle around, but I think Spurs not having any European competition this season, they're going to be focusing solely on the league. This is very contingent on Harry Kane staying at the club, which at this point in the transfer window, I think he will. Of course, that could age very poorly, but I think Ange Postecoglou, I think he's a fantastic hire. I think he's going to bring a lot to the squad. I think players like Son Heung-min is going to be a lot better than he was last season. I think that Harry Kane, I think this is going to be his last season playing for Tottenham, and I think he's going to want to bow out on high. I think Richarlison certainly can't be as bad as he was goals and assist wise last season. And I think Tottenham are going to be a good side. I think not having any other competitions to worry about is going to help them. I think Postecoglou is going to bring a much better style of play than we have seen previously. So because of that, I can see Tottenham finishing around sixth place. Now moving into fifth place, I have Chelsea. I am really buoyed by Chelsea this season. I was really close to putting them into the top four, to be honest. But with Nkunku being injured, and I think Nkunku might be their best player. I'm just a little bit worried if he's going to be out for a few months because I think he's having knee surgery. But Pochettino has really brought a vibrant atmosphere to Chelsea. They've done really well in preseason. Now, how much stock we can take in preseason, obviously, we can't really say. But the team looks good. The team looks hungry. They look like they're running a lot more. I think Pochettino's a fantastic manager. I think he really enjoys working with this young group of players. And I feel good about Chelsea going into the season. I think they're going to finish fifth. They're a bit unpredictable, which is why I don't have them finishing in the top four. And with such a young squad and such a new squad, they're going to have their ups and downs throughout the season. But in many ways, I think this season's kind of a free hit for Pochettino. He certainly can't do as good as he did or as poorly as they did last season. And I think we're going to see some nice style of play. I think we're going to see them be a little bit more consistent throughout the season. And as a result, I think Chelsea will finish fifth. I'm just not sure if they quite have the quality to make the top four. But speaking of the top four, finishing in fourth, I'm predicting Liverpool. I think Liverpool have actually done some fantastic business during this transfer window, both buying and selling players. I think the Turkish lad that they've gotten from Germany, he is a fantastic signing, at least in the clips that I've seen of him. He looks like a really skillful player. I think McAllister is a wonderful signing. He brings a lot to the Liverpool midfield. And I think getting money for players like Fabinho and Jordan Henderson, I think that's really good business. I'm just a little bit worried. They've lost players like James Milner and Jordan Henderson, who were big influences in the locker room. Obviously, Virgil van Dijk is coming into that captaincy role now. But I just feel like Liverpool are just a little bit of a team in transition at the moment. I'm also a little bit worried about them defensively. They were a bit porous last season, and I don't know if they've necessarily made those same adjustments that they need to. But they have a lot more industry in the midfield, so I think Jurgen Klopp is going to be able to institute a higher press like maybe he wants to, because I think some of the players they've brought in will certainly help with that. I'm just not sure if they have enough midfield depth to be able to sustain that throughout the entire season. So unless Liverpool makes some signings towards the end of this transfer window, especially in like the holding midfield roles, um, I just don't know if they have the squad depth there to be able to maintain like a title challenge, which is why at the moment I have them finishing fourth, but I do think they will be better than they were last season. Moving into third place, I think it's going to be Manchester United. I think United have made some good signings during the summer transfer window. I think Onana immediately improves the goalkeeping situation. Despite what some United fans have complained about during preseason, I think Mason Mount is a really good signing, and I'm excited to see him playing for Manchester United. I think Casemiro, Mount, and Fernandez is a really good midfield three. And you have a bit of depth there. If McTominay stays at the club, he'll be coming on. Ericsson will be coming on as well. And I think we saw last season that Ericsson's legs maybe went at, the 60-minute mark, but there's a lot more depth in that midfield now. I don't think they're going to be asking the same of Christian Eriksen. So I think United's midfield looks much better than it did last season. I think the big question for everyone is where the goals going to come from with United. You obviously have someone like Marcus Rashford. Can he repeat the season that he had last season? I think he can, but United were amongst the lowest scorers last season, I think in the top six. Antony is a bit inconsistent. Will Jadon Sancho be better than he was last season? Will we see improvements from Alejandro Garnacho? And obviously the big signing, Rasmus Højlund. I think he's a good signing, but he's a bit raw. I don't think we're going to see the best from this season. I think he's 1 or 2 seasons away from being, a 20 goal a season striker. He's still young. He's still raw. I think he's with the right coach and the right team to mold him into a really good player, but I just don't think we're going to see that this season. So because of that, I could see Manchester United finishing around third. So this brings us to our top two. And then second, I have Arsenal. I think Arsenal have done fantastic summer transfer window business. Timber looks like the real deal. Declan Rice looks like the real deal. They've also signed David Raya, who's going to provide some competition for Aaron Ramsdale. I think that's a really interesting signing. And they've also signed Kai Havertz, who honestly feels like a bit of an unknown. What is Kai Havertz's best position? But I think if they can get 15 goals out of him, that'll be a really good signing. I think Arsenal are a fantastic team. There's a lot of pressure on Arsenal this season to close the gap to Manchester City and put in another sustained title challenge and possibly win a trophy this season. I think if Arsenal are going to win something, I think they're going to go for a domestic cup. I can see Arteta going for a domestic cup very strongly. And I think they will challenge Manchester City, but I just don't quite have them winning it at the moment. I do think Arsenal are going to be City's closest title challengers. I think they're going to put in a sustained title challenge, but I still have City winning it. Despite winning the treble last season and any potential drop off, City still have the two best players in the Premier League in De Bruyne and in Erling Haaland. They have lost Ilkay Gundogan, who I think is a big loss, and they have lost Riyad Mahrez, who is another big loss. That's a lot of goals there. But they still have players like Jack Grealish. They still have players like Phil Foden. I think Julian Alvarez is going to play a bigger role this season. They still have players who are hungry and are looking to get better. Additionally, I just don't see Pep Guardiola allowing the team to fall off as far as their mentality is concerned. Until someone else proves that they can beat Manchester City is still the team who I'm picking to be Premier League champions. And to be honest, the only way I think City aren't champions is if they beat themselves, if they drop off mentally. But the quality is there, the squad depth is there, and they have the best coach in the English Premier League. So because of that, I think Manchester City are going to win the English Premier League. So that being said, those are my English Premier League predictions for the 2023-24 season. There's a good chance I'm going to be wrong, as most predictions are. But let me know in the comments section who you think is going to finish where. Let me know what you think I got wrong. Let me know what you think I got right, if I got anything right. And I'm really looking forward to the Premier League season. I hope you all too. And here's to another wonderful year of the beautiful game. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you all in the next one.